In this video, I'm going to talk about how to create and maintain your personal peace. This is the second video in the series. In the previous video, I spoke about the things we can do physically to create peace in the physical realm in our bodies, through what we put into our bodies, what we do with our bodies. So go watch that video if that's where you want to start. But in this video, we're going to talk about the realm of the mind. So we can find peace in body, mind and spirit. Sometimes we see those as three separate things, and I'm treating them separately in a way because I'm doing three separate videos about them. But the thing to notice is that you can't really separate them. Your body, mind and spirit are all interconnected and interrelated, and a problem in one area will cause a problem or a feeling, a negative feeling in another area. So they all work together, but I'm just separating them out so that you can understand the principles of how to create and maintain your personal peace. So let's look at what we can do to bring peace to our mind. So one of the things people often talk about is trying to get to sleep at night. They can't switch their mind off, or even just getting through the day. There's something troubling them and they can't switch their mind off. They just go over and over the situation. So that's kind of one thing that disturbs our peace. Other people are sort of disturbed by what they're watching on the news, and they sort of go down a rabbit hole and really know every detail about something very bad that's happening in the world, and then they can't sleep at night. And I think another situation, and one I've certainly had, well, I mean, I've had those two as well, but another situation is feeling a bit trapped, that you've sort of you've got involved with something that you didn't really need to get involved with, and you wish you hadn't got involved with, and you're sort of planning how you can extract yourself out of that. And the fourth situation is this: I'll be happy when, I'll have peace when. So when I've done something, or when this thing has happened, after that, then I'll have peace, or after that, then I'll be happy, or after that, then I'll have space to focus on my life the way I want to. And I can tell you from personal experience that we all wrestle with these things, but all those things should not be dictating your personal peace. So as I mentioned in the previous video, I was born with a sort of highly sensitive personality, as are about a quarter of the world's population, which just means that if you've got a highly sensitive personality, it just means that you feel everything sort of 10 times deeper than people who don't have a highly sensitive personality, and therefore you can become overwhelmed more easily. And this is why my whole life I've had to work out how to create and maintain personal peace. And some of the methods I used in the past were really bad coping mechanisms, which I talked about in the last video. But also, because it's been a lifelong thing, I've really refined how to create and maintain personal peace. One of the things I did in my early 20s, really, I decided I would stop watching horror films. I mean, I like films, I like the cinema, and I could watch a movie every day. I really, ever since being a little kid, and I think my parents took me to the cinema to see something like Disney's Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, or Pinocchio, something like that. It's that long ago, I can't remember which was first. But I was absolutely fascinated with the cinema, and I like stories, and so obviously the whole Hollywood movie industry and the British film industry fascinates me. And I would watch a couple of movies every day left to my own devices. I don't always do that. I don't often do that. I often get through the day without watching any movies, or through a week without watching any movies, simply because I've got stuff to do in life. But back in my 20s, I was really having trouble sleeping after watching any sort of horror movie. Even, there could be the most ridiculous horror movies, the early 1960s and 1950s vampire movies or anything like that, or zombies. I couldn't get the sort of images out of my mind. So just for my personal peace, I decided that that is a genre of movie that I just don't watch, and it's paid dividends because I sleep really well. It's very, very rare that I can't sleep. It's so rare. It's really notable if I can't sleep, and I really analyse why it was. And I know other people have difficulty sleeping more often, but for me, I don't. And one of the things I attribute it to is think about what you're putting into your mind, because that affects what you get out of your mind. So that kind of leads on nicely to if you get obsessed with a news story and wars and rumours of wars in the world, and just that fear-mongering, especially that American TV channels do. They always crank it up more. But even the British media, they're always looking for bad news. I know they put a little cat story or dog story as the last story sometimes, but if you analyse what the news stories are, they're all negative. And if you're putting those images, pictures and words into your mind several times a day, then you're building up a store of negative, scary images, and you're not going to have peace in your mind. And so much in the news is not something I can do very much about. Sure, I can donate to a charity when there's a disaster, an emergency. But in terms of me having power to stop a war, I can't imagine how I'd begin to do that. Yeah, we could go and protest, we could go and do all sorts of things, but I don't think I've got much power over or control over a lot of stuff that you see in the news. I just don't. I'm not saying that we live our lives sort of just placid and unengaged with society. I'm not saying that at all. But, we don't want to be filling our mind with negative images and frightening images over and over again. A big part of my working life, 25 years, has been involved in Rwanda, where obviously there's a lot of horror stories of the past, and I've seen some horrific things, especially in the early days. So I really had to kind of manage that, because I wanted to understand the country I was visiting to go and do the projects that we did. But I also don't want to be overloaded with the horror stories all the time. I want to see just enough to see the steps that we could take to improve things permanently. And in a way, in modern life, it's very difficult to avoid a lot of the news. If you don't watch it on TV, it's on your phone. If you don't watch it on your phone, it's on the newspaper stand. It's everywhere. It really is everywhere. And top of all that, you've got a load of advertising. Everything's infested with advertising. You may have even had to watch an advert before you watch this video. I know, I don't really have I don't have any control over that at the moment when I'm making this video, because I'm not yet monetized, but I noticed that YouTube still puts an ad before the video. So I don't know who's getting that money. It isn't me. But here's the thing. We're bombarded with information and messages, so we need to take control of what's going into our eyes and in our ears and into our mind. So for me, one of the ways I do that is to go out in nature, and that's something I kind of wrestle with, just say go for a walk in nature. There's a bit of me, there's the inner child who is a bit, I don't know if they're lazy or just don't believe that going for a walk is going to work. So I have to kind of manage that and almost force myself to go out, disconnect from, devices and all that, and the TV, and go out for a walk in nature. And I always come back refreshed and uplifted. It really doesn't matter if it's snowing, raining, sunshine or a heat wave. I always come back much more positive and refreshed when I do that, because what you're putting into your eyes and your ears is kind of bird song, all the green and the colours in the trees and the forest and along the lane and all the rest of it, and that's kind of much more natural for humans to do. So it's uplifting. And apparently scientists have discovered, especially in a forest, that trees are giving off all sorts of little microscopic stuff to protect themselves, that when we walk through a forest and breathe in that sort of that damp forest smell, is actually doing a lot of good for humans too. One of the ways that we bring peace and maintain peace in our mind is coming into the present moment. A lot of what your mind wants to do is regrets of the past, or fear for the future. It's like we're crucified between two thieves. One thief, it steals our peace, is regrets of the past. The other thief is fear of the future. Some of us are obviously frightened of the present and what's going on. But we're between those two things, the fear of the past or regrets of the past and fear of the future. And what we need to do is come into the present moment. We need to come into the here and now. And there's lots of ways of doing that. And this borders on to the spiritual, which I'll talk about in the next video. But just simple things like, when was the last time you were outside, even if you've got a garden and you've got the joy of having a garden yourself, when was the last time you went out and took your shoes and socks off and just stood on the earth? When was the last time, if you've ever done it, you went out barefoot in the rain? Because just earthing yourself by letting the flesh of your soles of your feet touch the earth electrically discharges something from the human body. That's a scientific fact. I'm not making this up. It's not all woo-woo. That's a scientific proven fact, that we carry a sort of electricity. I don't understand all that, but when you stand barefoot on the earth, that sort of charge is discharged into the earth, and that can bring a level of well-being. Another thing that I rarely do, but I did do last year, is if you go to a beach, I'm in my 60s, but do you take your socks and shoes off and have a little paddle at the edge of the sea? And it just struck me last summer, that I hadn't done that. And my daughter always, they'll sort of have a little paddle, even though they're adults. They'll take their sandals off and have a little paddle in the sea. It's just something they do. And one of them's into the cold water swimming. I'm not quite ready for that. But she talks about when she goes into cold water, even in the winter months, how it sort of cleanses the mind. And I believe her. I think that's a proven sort of thing as well. I'm not ready to do that, but just putting your feet and feeling the water, all these things, what they're doing is they're bringing us into the now moment. And when we hear now and present that, and realise that we're a physical being, that we have a soul and a mind, and we can feel things, that begins to bring peace, because you realise a lot of the stuff you've been letting rattle around your brain, none of that really matters. None of that is something that you have control over. And so when you come into the now moment and you're still, and even better if you can be silent and still, then you're coming into the spiritual realm, but it brings peace to the mind. Another way that overlaps is, and again I'll sort of explain this more in the next video where we're talking about the spiritual, but when you come to meditation, a lot of meditation teachers talk about a mantra. It's just a focus word, and it doesn't really matter what it is, but the point of the mantra or the focus word, you could just say biscuits, but if you really like biscuits, you might get distracted with that. But it really doesn't matter what the word is, but the point of the mantra or the focus word is this, that when you become still and silent, and you begin to listen to your own breath, the breath in and the breath out, quickly as you still your soul, your mind will want activity, and it will start going off on some tangent and wanting you to think about that. And what the focus word does is bring you back to the here and now, but I'll talk about that more in the next video. But basically, bringing about peace in your mind is putting in good, peaceful stuff into your mind, putting nature into your mind. And then what are your hobbies? Do you like photography? Then get out in nature and do some photographs. Do you like old buildings and architecture? Get out there, focus on that, because while you're focusing on your hobby and those things, then you're not thinking about all the garbage that you've put in your brain previously. Or another great one is art. When did you last doodle? Why don't you get a pen? I mean, you can do it with a blue ballpoint pen and a bit of lined paper, it doesn't really matter. But have a little doodle, get some space, some time on your own if you can, and have a little doodle. One of the memories of my mum, God bless her, God rest her soul, is that she used to doodle. And I remember when, I'm going back to the 1960s now, and the sort of Thomas the Tank Engine books were out. The thought of them being on TV, well, initially we didn't even have a TV, that's the first thing. But it would be decades later when Thomas the Tank Engine came onto the telly. But we used to have the books, and I was fascinated in trains anyway. And I tried to draw them and couldn't draw them, but my mum, because she doodled every day, she sort of sketched them, and I couldn't believe that she could draw Thomas the Tank Engine and his train friends, Gordon and Henry and all them. I couldn't believe that she could draw them fairly accurately. But that's just because she doodled every day, and she didn't show anyone the doodles. It was just something she used to do in that period of her life. So what about you? I'm just thinking, I literally just this week bought some art materials because I'm going to start drawing again, because I did a lot of that in my teenage years. And over the years, there's just, art is sort of in me, and I've just neglected it really. So I'm going to attempt to draw something every day for a month, I guess, and then I'm trying to develop a habit that I just draw something every day. What I remember in my teenage years, and you get all the teenage fears and angst when when you're 13 or 14, 15. But we used to have this room in the house that was like the best room, and you weren't really supposed to go in there. But as we got older, the rules became more lax. And so it's just because of the way it was when we grew up, the room wasn't used very often. So I started using it after school. That's what we used it for, homework. You were allowed to go in to do your homework because it was a quiet room. So I started to go in after school and just doing these elaborate doodles. They were doodles really, but elaborate drawings, and built up a folder. And I did that every day. And that was really my therapy as a teenager. And it brought peace. It brought a lot of peace. I wouldn't have identified it like that now, but when I look back, I was processing the fears and worries of the day down on paper in pictures. Other friends of mine are real gardeners, and they've got an allotment or they've got their own garden and just do amazing things, and their gardens are immaculate because they spend time out in nature. And there's something about digging into the soil. We do a little bit. We always think we should do more, but it's just obviously not our priority, because otherwise we'd be doing it every day. But we do a little bit, and we've got a nice garden. But these people that are out there every day doing an hour a day gardening, getting their hands dirty in the soil, planting things, weeding and all that, they're connecting with the earth and with nature. And of course they do it because that brings peace to the mind. Now, as I said, with this, the mental well-being, the mental peace overlaps quite a bit with spirituality, or with spiritual ways you can bring spiritual peace. So we'll talk about that in the next video. And hopefully you can watch all three videos together, the body, the mind and the spirit, and you'll see how really they all overlap with one another. And if you do some of these things I'm sharing about that I've done, then you will create and maintain personal peace. I'll give you the tools in these videos to create and maintain personal peace, and you'll find the ways that work for you. Everyone's different, but you'll find something that will work for you. And as long as you practice that, almost become like a monk or a nun, in the sense of, the way around the monastery, everything's focused on prayer and the spiritual practices. If you become like that, protecting your mental peace and your internal peace, body, mind and spirit, if you become like that, almost religious about it, not with joining a religion, but becoming religious about the practices, then you will learn to create and maintain personal peace. So now let's talk about how we can create and maintain peace in the spiritual realm. And you can watch that video here.